Well, I have the pleasure today of sitting down with Chard Chénier. Chard is an artist based in Montreal whose work evokes emotion, movement, dynamism, as well as exploring different places, different feelings, and even in some cases, different dreams. So, Chard, we're going to discuss your show, Emotional Landscapes, today. And I first wanted to talk a little bit about the title, which is evocative, poetic, but also deeply personal. What does it mean to you, and how did it shape how you approached this body of work?
Well, I began with some actual landscapes, mountains, valleys, rivers, and slowly delved inwards to express the emotions not only that landscapes evoke in me, but also what is inside of me when I'm painting. So the paintings went from pictorial, actual landscapes, to emotional landscapes within myself. And, each day we live with all these emotions, but we don't really have all the words necessary to describe them. But with painting, you can express an emotion that transcends words. And so that's how the series of paintings developed into a series of emotional landscapes.
And building on that idea of emotion, do you find that emotion is what's guiding your hand in the studio, or is it revealing itself more gradually in the work?
Well, there's a kind of an inner necessity that pulls me into the studio, a feeling that I don't have words to describe. And as I start to paint, then the emotion becomes more real and the painting becomes more real. Each painting is a kind of state of being at that moment in time in the context of what I'm living through.
And also talking a little bit more about emotions, and let's get to talking about some of the art in the show. I think we saw it at the beginning, but is there a specific piece in this show that captures the heart of emotional landscapes? Tell us a bit about execution, conceptualization, bring us into your world.
Well, the painting Koan, which we started this interview with, was a result of 6 studies I did, just trusting and experimenting with color fields and lines and just enjoying myself and having fun. And each piece, as I developed them, I did 6 of them, and by the time the 6 were done, there was a theme that was emerging of a flight towards some higher destination, which eventually became Koan, which showed me as an abstract bird flying down, looking downwards, paying homage to my soul, my psyche underneath that was guiding me to this point. I feel that there's a part of me deep inside that I'm not always aware of, but that influences what I create. And so Koan is basically that. It shows a figure deep underground pointing upwards and this abstract bird bowing down and with respect. So that's, I feel that there's a guide within me that guides the art.
That's absolutely fascinating, and Koan is a beautiful piece, and I especially love the color palette that you used in Koan and the conceptualization of that series of paintings. Building on that idea and building on the idea of symbols in your work, is there a recurring form or gesture that you see in your work as a personal vocabulary? Are there things that you go back to? Did you try and experiment a little bit more with different symbols within this show, Emotional Landscapes?
Well, interestingly, I grew up on the prairies, and the wind was always an invisible but beautiful presence that was shaping everything around me. And all my life I've seen the wind shaping leaves, waves, and the movement and the lines and the colors that were generated by the wind were really fascinating to me. And you'll see when you go through the show, there's always movement everywhere. And I'm very aware of the idea that the wind is like the mystery of the life force that goes through everything. And it's there, but we don't see it. And so that's a recurring series of lines, shapes, forms that you'll see throughout the whole exhibition.
And what's changed how you've been preparing for this particular show? I know that we mentioned that you are at a bit of a transition period in your career and in your painting. So tell us a bit about what's changed in the preparations for this show.
Well, the first thing is that 2 years ago I had a 50-year retrospective, which gave me a pause to contemplate what I did over 50 years. And the result was a kind of deeper trust in my intuition, in a more atavistic visual experience, and trusting that the emotions that I'm pouring into it would connect with others. So that was a big leap in terms of personal faith in what I'm doing. And so that helped me feel more free and more relaxed, and actually in a way more detached. I was more the spectator watching everything unfold this time around.
Are you finding with this particular show, as you mentioned, you are at that point of change? How are you staying open to those changes without losing the essence of your artistic voice as you create your work?
Well, I think it's because my approach is fundamentally atavistic. It's not ideological. I'm not following any particular school of thought. I'm following my basic human instincts to try to create something beautiful that has some kind of real balance to it, and I'm trying to get through what's real about being alive and how beautiful the mystery is. And I try to stay true and allow the mystery to remain.
Now we're gonna pivot ever so slightly, and we're going to discuss something that we both love, which is travel and traveling. And you have done quite a bit of traveling in the past couple of years. What shifts in your creative thinking when you're immersed in that new place versus when you're thinking about it later in your studio back at home?
Well, there are so many different experiences in Italy and in Spain and in Israel, but I would say the prominent one that sticks with me is having seen some Neanderthal sculpture, perhaps only 3 inches tall, but quite ancient, and it was quite similar to Brancusi's work, and it was beautiful, and you could imagine someone thousands and thousands of years ago creating this in isolation. So there was an artist who had that pure aesthetic even then, and it gave me an idea of the universality of how profound and how deep it is, the human connection with the beyond time. So there's a kind of timelessness that comes out of travel, and you see all these empires come and go. But even thousands of years ago, people were creating great things. The Etruscans, when I was in Italy, seeing the Etruscan Museum and seeing the joy and the stunning beauty of their bronze sculptures, and realizing, we think we're so innovative and we're so amazing in this century, but actually this has been going on for countless years of creativity and personal commitment in art. So I felt kind of a bond. So when I come back to Montreal, I realize, hey, I'm not only connected to these other countries, I'm connected to other artists that have been contributing to human civilization for centuries. And that's what's changed a lot, compared to not having traveled at all.
And building upon that, have there also been any authors, any essays, poets that have left lasting impressions on your practice? Are there certain literary people or figures that you return to? Anybody new that you've discovered?
Oh, there are so many, but I find Thomas Tranströmer, the Nobel Peace Prize winner for poetry. I love the way he approaches ordinary moments from a unique and personal and poetic angle. And so when I create, I try to reach out for something more transcendental that's beyond my own normal perceptions in the bubble that I'm living in North America. I'm looking for something that goes deeper than that, to previous centuries. So that's an influence, and definitely Van Gogh's letters made a big impression on me because of his sensitivity and his commitment to his art, which I feel I try to persevere in, with him as an example.
I, like you, love Van Gogh's letters as well, so I can relate to that. Before we wrap things up, we're going to return to another series, a beloved series, one of my personal favorites, the Calidroptics. Tell us, how did that come about? What were some of the questions or some of the instincts that drove those initial Calidroptics, and how do you see the Calidroptics growing?
Well, I started in the 70s in Vancouver trying to develop a universal language pictorially. So I was looking at calligraphy, and I figured I would drop ink as if it's calligraphy, but try to create figures and see what would happen. Because what I liked about that approach was that I had to let go of trying to be so much in control of everything and have a kind of a pivot point where, yes, it was chaotic, but it was also a chaotic that had some kind of emotional and higher level of dropping of the ink. I was communicating beyond myself with that without trying to control it. So it's like calligraphy, but they're bodies, and they're not super controlled. And then after that, I manipulate them slightly to put some human emotion in it. So I like the idea that it was accidental, but with some unconscious intent that I would understand later.
You talk about manipulating these bodies. How do you manipulate them? Is it with a kind of almost a paintbrush? Do you just move the paper ever so slightly? What goes into those manipulations? Because everything feels so calculated when you look at them. But to hear that they're more of a dropping and a letting go, it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I try to find different shapes to go and tweak the lines a little bit. They take a good 24 to 36 hours to dry.
Wow.
Because they're very thick when they drop down the ink. And I use very high quality paper to produce them. So I have to leave it alone, which is another element. And as it dries, I study it and I see, well, maybe I can take a brush and emphasize a line to just add some nuance to the emotion of the gesture that the figure is making. After that's dried, then I go and add touches of color to accentuate motion and emotional meaning. So I'm always working without being afraid. In other words, it's fearless doing it, and then you have to be bold in manipulating it, and that's what makes it interesting. It's completely carefree, and at the same time, it's calculated, and there's a lot of aesthetic final details that bring it to life.
That's wonderful. I mean, we're sitting in a room surrounded by your artwork, and I think that's a great kind of way to bring everything back to the present. The work that's going into emotional landscapes is very dynamic, and that dynamism, I think, is a representation of where you are in this magical career that you have had that has spanned decades. I think it's safe to say.
60 years, yeah.
I think it's safe to say.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to hear you talk about your practice and to talk about these different aspects of that practice. I'm just wondering, where do we go from here?
Well, I'm working on some pieces that may add it into the show at the end. I'm always a strong believer that you have to take risks in what you're doing, and so I'm taking further and deeper risks and trying to go further from based on what I've learned thus far. So it's always a learning process. So where it's going now is more a desire to put more meaning with a great, I can't even put it into words. It's like more intensity, more passion, more feeling. I think that's what matters. When you go to see an exhibition, you don't want to just see an ideology or a theory of art or a school of art. you want to feel something. And I think that's what I'm always working towards, is to create something that people go and say, your heart is thinking and your mind is feeling. And that's what I hope the work does.
And I think that this body of work definitely captures that emotion. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you,
and
Anthony.
for talking about your artistic practice and what we have coming up. So Emotional Landscapes will be on view at Galerie L'Espace from the 19th to the 24th of June. We hope to see you all there. Come down, come meet Chard, come pick Chard's brain. I know I love picking Chard's brain. And thank you again.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Chard.
Anthony. You're too kind, Anthony. Thank you. Bye.